A Texas daycare is facing lawsuits from two different families right now after parents say their young children were abused by untrained, uncaring staff members. And they claim they have the video evidence to prove it. We're discussing it all with the attorney in this case, Russell Button. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Millions of Americans drop their children off at child care centers every day. You might have done it yourself this morning. And they expect those children will be happy and healthy when they pick them up later on. But as we have covered here on Sidebar, unfortunately, that is not always the case. And now, several parents in Texas say that their children were being mistreated. And guess what? It was caught on camera. The Button Law Firm has filed two lawsuits against the Children's Courtyard in Southwest Austin. The Milivojevic family says that they were able to see their daughter, who was almost 2 at the time, being, quote, aggressively handled and inappropriately disciplined on a live stream in May of 2023. It was apparently only her second day at the daycare. The family says that they pulled her out of the daycare right away, reported everything to the facility's director, but they say nothing was done. So then they reported it to the state. And that is when attorney Russell Button's law firm got involved. His team has started sifting through the video that the family gave them, and actually they found an incident that connected back to a different lawsuit that the firm had filed earlier this year. The Dominguez family said that they also saw their 2-year-old being mistreated on the live feed. And in these videos, the law firm was able to see that that little boy apparently being abused by the same employee that allegedly hurt the Milivojevic family in the same way. So that actually led to the Dominguez family updating their complaint. The child's father said that he rushed to the daycare after he says he saw that the employee was smothering his son with a blanket to try to keep him quiet, and then uncovered him and slapped him in the face multiple times. Talking litigation, talking lawsuits like this, I gotta call out a firm that is renowned in the personal injury litigation space. Morgan & Morgan, our sponsor, America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you should get hurt, this may be the firm you want in your corner. I mean, not only is there no upfront fee, not only do they make the process as simple as possible because it can all be done on your smartphone, but Morgan & Morgan has an incredible track record. For example, I'm talking verdicts of $6.8 million in New York, $12 million in Florida, and $26 million in Philadelphia. And by the way, all of these are higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. And even if your case isn't worth millions of dollars, Morgan & Morgan will fight for what you deserve. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. I want to bring on Russell Button right now to talk more about this. Russell, thanks so much for taking the time. So were you shocked when you see this video and you see this connection?
It was alarming. It was absolutely alarming to us. But quite frankly, now that we know what we know, I can't say I'm surprised.
Talk to me about the Dominguez suit first, and then we'll talk about the Milivojevic suit.
So the Dominguez family, when they first reached out to us, and as we were learning what happened, this father is at work back in July 2023. He just happens to be watching the live feed at that time, and to every parent's worst nightmare, he sees his 2-year-old little boy being physically abused at the Children's Courtyard daycare. And he immediately puts on the record and captures the caregiver smothering his little toddler with a blanket and then forcefully slapping the child's face and head to keep him quiet during nap time. And that abuse was then reported by the family to the daycare and the state authorities. And he pulled his kid out of that daycare. And that's when they reached out to us. So when we filed that lawsuit, and the local media reported on the case, we learned even more about what was really going on at the Children's Courtyard. And we got in our hands a video from a different parent, but of the same room just 2 months prior. And it was a wider lens view. And while that parent that reached out to us, the Milivojevic family, was looking at their child, what we also saw and shocked us was that the same Dominguez family toddler was being abused by the same caregiver 2 months prior in the same way. Forced him to get down on his nap mat, put a blanket over his head, and was forcefully hitting him on his head to keep him quiet during nap time. And that was just our Dominguez family toddler's third day at daycare.
And so you amended that lawsuit in order to include these additional details. What is the status of the Dominguez lawsuit?
They're both ongoing in discovery. We amended the lawsuit, added in these new facts, because now that we know, we would already be looking for everything associated with any child when we filed a lawsuit. All prior incidents, whether they were reported, whether they were caught or not, we want to discover all that information during our investigations in the lawsuits. But now that we actually have proof on video that this was happening 2 months prior, so we have two different incidents with a 2-month spread in between during this kid's entire tenure at this daycare, now we want to know what happened every single day, because this is not new behavior by these caregivers. This looked like a business as usual.
Talk to me about now the Milivojevic lawsuit, and what are the allegations there?
So while similar to the Dominguez family, they had their 18-month-old daughter at daycare. This was just her second day. And in this same classroom that the Dominguez family was in. And so the mom just happened to be watching the live stream that day. And she sees another child in the video actually get negligently treated. And so she is alarmed, turns on the record, and then it turns out that a different caregiver, there were two caregivers in the room, a different caregiver goes and grabs her child and yanks her child, dangles her around, and swung her arms as if she was just a rag doll. And the other caregiver in the room didn't do anything. Okay, didn't say anything, didn't go to stop the actions, nobody intervened, and all this is on live stream that the daycare should be monitoring, and they weren't. And then to go on beyond that, this Milivojevic family and mother see it happen to other kids, and so she thankfully caught all of this on camera as much as possible, and then immediately went down to the daycare and took her kid out, thankfully. But she also, and more importantly, reported it to the daycare director immediately. Okay. And this is in May of 2023, and provided the daycare director this footage. And the daycare director at Children's Courtyard claimed that corrective actions were taken for this. But now that we learned through the Dominguez case that shows this abuse still happening 2 months later, the daycare didn't report this incident to the state, the Milivojevic family incident, and what was provided to them. The caregivers were not terminated after that, either of them in the classroom. And again, now that we know this abuse continued to happen, that the retraining that was promised to this family was not done. This all could have easily been prevented, because we know that there's no excuse for child abuse.
First of all, are these employees still employed there, and does the Courtyard even still exist after these allegations?
This daycare does still exist. They are still up and running. What changes they've decided to make, that's what we fully intend on getting answers to. What they intend to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because when we pulled prior licensing information, there were numerous prior violations on this facility, let alone the neighboring facilities of Children's Courtyard.
With these employees or different employees?
Those are just all the violations for that daycare of violating just the minimum standards. You know, again, in our investigations, largely we find things that even went above and beyond what the state is informed about for self-reporting from these daycares and parents. But to answer your question on are the caregivers still there? We've heard that the one caregiver that was abusing the Dominguez child over the span of the 2 months was terminated, but we don't know why. We don't have that information yet. And we look forward to gathering that information to see when they made this decision, because they had knowledge of it for an entire 2 months. So what changed, you know? And we're not aware of the other one, whether or not they're still there or were terminated. But in our belief and our feelings that anyone associated with either seeing the abuse and not doing anything about it, not saying anything about it, or actively engaged in these reckless actions with children, should have been held accountable and will through our case.
Through the course of the litigation with these two lawsuits, has Courtyard defended itself and said this is not child abuse? This is, I don't know, necessary handling of the children in this situation? Have you heard a defense so far?
All we've heard is just a denial of these claims. That's as far as we've gotten with their representatives at this point. And we fully look forward to holding them accountable, determining why this was not just allowed to happen, but allowed to continue to happen. And why no significant changes were being made, so this isn't a systematic problem, which is what all the evidence to this point is indicating that it is.
So with the alleged yanking and throwing and covering, what were the injuries that were sustained by both of these children, and how are they doing now?
Well, as everyone knows, and as we deal with in all of our daycare and childcare injury cases, when children are in these prime development ages, 18 months, 2 years old, this is their anything that happens to them in the sense of child abuse, reckless actions, child endangerment, being abandoned. I mean, any of these things, but especially what happened here by trusted figures that these kids are supposed to be, able to rely on just like their parents. It has a significant impact on their development, on how they grow and are able to deal with things moving forward. And so both of these families, their children, they're both going through their own processes, right, of their healing recovery routes. But especially this Dominguez family, with the fact that we now know that this smothering, this negligent actions, this reckless behavior by these caregivers, slapping a child, smothering their face to keep them quiet during nap time, this was happening nearly during this entire kid's tenure at this daycare. And we have reason to believe that it was happening on multiple occasions, if not daily. So these families are still reeling. They're still healing in their own way. And with kids, a lot of times, many of the traumatic symptoms that they have starts to show over time, even more and more and more. So they're going to see new problems that they hadn't had to date yet. But the other part of this is the parents' trust, right? It's complete betrayal when they expect, by paying their hard-earned money to these daycares to keep their kids safe and to never have to learn or experience and believe that their kids are going through this stuff. These parents' trust and the whole family dynamic is just shattered when, they get the call, they see the footage, and then they see their kids struggling after they learn of child abuse.
Like, you wonder, who can you trust today, right? I mean, unbelievable to be thinking about this and seeing it. My gosh. Now, I want to go back to something that you mentioned, the citations, because the lawsuit lays out pages of citations that the Texas Health and Human Services Commission gave or issued to Children's Courtyard between October 2018 and March of 2023. I'm going to lay out a few examples for our audience. So February 2019, cited for failing to properly supervise children in care when 2 children were forgotten and left unattended on the playground. 1 in June of 2019, cited for failing to ensure employees hold and comfort an infant child when the infant was injured and upset as the result of the employee's own conduct. And then get this one, after that May 2023 incident, they continued to rack up citations, including citations for the situation involving Shannon Hernandez, who is one of the employees here. July 2023, cited for allowing an employee whose behavior threatens children to remain present when Children's Courtyard permitted Shannon Marie Hernandez to remain with children for an additional 3 hours after learning the employee posed a risk to the children's safety. October 2023, cited for caregivers not promptly changing children's diapers and causing diaper rash on the children. And how about this one? January 2024, cited for a caregiver failing to know the number of children they were responsible for. And over the last 6 years, I should say, Children's Courtyard had been cited numerous times for not having first aid kits in transport vehicles, not making sure employees knew CPR for children, not keeping immunization paperwork up to date. So, Russell, the question as I say this, A, what have you heard from the state? And B, again, how has this company, how is this operation but allowed to still stay in business?
It's alarming, right? I mean, this stuff just shocks the conscience. As far as, what have we gotten from the state? These are all things that we do. As soon as we get a call, we immediately go and we pull all these violations, all the reports that we can. And then when we file a lawsuit in our discovery, it's a key component of it, because small things matter, right? So not having a first aid kit, that's a critical thing, because if you've got something going on with a child there that needs that and you don't have that in that room, kids can be seriously injured, right? So it's just all of these minimum standards. These are bare minimums that the state, the law requires, are consistently being violated. What does it tell you? It tells you got a systematic problem across the board, top to bottom, with their documentation, with the way they qualify their caregivers, with the way they train them or their lack thereof, with the way they supervise them. There's just a litany of issues that, again, we look forward to discovering and to holding them accountable for that. But to say, is this amount of violations and the type and the severity of them a disturbing thing? It absolutely is.
So this lawsuit lists 4 causes of action: negligence, negligence per se, gross negligence, and negligent activity. What are the differences?
Yeah. So with regard to negligence, negligence is failing to do what a reasonable daycare, what a reasonable caregiver would have done under the same circumstances, like at other daycares, your industry standard stuff. So what do we look for there, right? We're going into, were these caregivers involved in the Dominguez and the Milivojevic families' cases? Were they qualified? Was the director qualified? And there's checklists to look for that. There's different things that we anticipate getting in discovery regarding their personnel files, regarding their training documentation or lack thereof, and regarding their prior work experiences and prior complaints from other employers and stuff like that. So we fully look into getting into that from a negligence standpoint. Negligence is also training, right? Were they trained? Were they not trained? Were they adequately trained? A lot of times we see in these cases that they just have a little video up and a PowerPoint, and it's just a little click through thing, but it's not a real training. It's not adequate training. So what was going on in their training at this children's courtyard? And then supervision is negligent supervision. Were these caregivers being supervised by management, by leadership? Because we know, based off the evidence, that they weren't, but we're going to go and make sure that we know all those angles. And there's a whole other host of different things. Did they have policies and procedures for doing this properly? And what was management? Were they qualified, right? Were they doing a good job? Were they having issues as well? Were any of these people ever written up? Because either they did investigations and they didn't do anything about it, or they never investigated a single violation, a single incident, and they got all these citations, but they're not changing anything. They're not looking at it. So that's what the crux of our case is. And then whether it rises to the level of gross negligence is based on the law. Was this reckless? Was this a conscious disregard for the safety of children? Did their conduct rise to the level of child endangerment? And we believe that all these claims will be met, but that's the evidence that we look forward to gathering in our case to pursue.
And what are you looking for in terms of damages for both cases?
We're looking for them to be held fully accountable for anything and everything that these 2 children and these families have had to go through to this point and will go through for the rest of their life. When children are abused at that age, we know, based off of prior cases, based off of literature, based off of experts in science, that child abuse at that prime developmental age has a whole host of long-term complications and issues with these children that many times they'll learn at a later point. And so we fully look forward to holding them accountable for that, as well as making sure that the damages in this case and the verdict also hold the daycare accountable for any gross negligence, and to deter this behavior from happening again, to actually send them a message that this is not okay. The community is not going to allow a daycare to operate this way and endanger children this way when they're being paid to keep them safe. And those are the two aspects of damages that we fully look forward to asking for. And ultimately, a jury will be making that decision in this case, and it will be the community that is also being affected by what Children's Courtyard's decisions are in this case and other daycares.
Now, Russell, unfortunately, before I let you go, we have talked before here on Sidebar about a different daycare center in Plano where a child got hold of a vape pen. Jocelyn Carter said that her 20-month-old daughter was poisoned at Bright Horizons at Legacy Daycare when she used an employee's vape pen while the employee was in the bathroom. That was the child's first day at daycare, too. Any updates on that case?
Yeah, that case is still moving forward. We're getting discovery in, and we fully look forward to holding them accountable in that case. But at this point, it's still in the early discovery stages.
Look, Russell, obviously, these are allegations. They haven't been proven in a court of law as of yet. Having said that, the work that you're doing is incredibly important. And I'm glad we have an opportunity to highlight this because it's so disturbing. You know, there's why I deal with crimes every day. But when you deal with crimes against children, particularly this young, that aspect of vulnerability, how defenseless they are, is just what really crosses the line to a different level. So Russell Button, thank you for coming on. Wishing you luck, sending my best to the families as well who are going through this, and we'll see which way it progresses. But Russell, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse. Have a good one.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.